be True Parents' birthday.
Huh? True Parents Day. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just have a question for you. Do you think when true parents were growing up, they would think that they would become the true parents of mankind? I think everyone's on heavenly's path. My sermon this morning is titled Real Happiness. So I'd like to reread Father's Course from Wampio Kim's book on page 98, Father's Course and Our Life of Faith. What Wampio Kim is writing in his book, by the way, Wampio Kim was the first person that followed Father in Pyongyang. And that was back in the 40s. So he's talking about in his book what happened when he and Father were crossing the river. I think it was the Injin River, which is north of Seoul, Korea. And so he says in his book, we could hear the sound of the cannons of the Chinese Red Army. What had happened is the North Koreans had invaded the South in June 1950. And MacArthur landed in Incheon in September of 1950, and it was a terrible, devastating war on the Korean Peninsula. There was death and destruction everywhere. So the North Korean army, the communists, were forced to retreat because they were being surrounded by MacArthur, the American army, which came from Japan. So what had happened is in attacking the North Koreans, the prison where Father was staying, which is Hungnam Prison, was bombed. And so he was able to walk out of the prison gate, and now he's headed south. And that's what this is about. So they're headed south, and right then it looked like the whole Korean peninsula was reunited. And it was. But then the Chinese entered the war, and I think it was 400,000 Chinese soldiers crossed the Yalu River and started basically attacking the Allied forces, the UN forces. So we felt as if they were right behind us, and they were. It was such a tense moment. When we finished crossing the river, we heard a young general ordering his men to allow all the refugees to cross. They had to stop the enemy marching to the side of the bank, so they had to stop everyone. As we had already reached the UN side, we were allowed to pass and told to build a barricade. We worked hard and left. Then I could understand why Father didn't let us stay at the first house. They were dead tired. They had no food. It was very cold. They were walking basically in rags. And Father was pushing. So Wampio Kim is about 10 years younger than Father. He's maybe 20 years old so at that time. So he's pushing. And Wampio Kim is tired, and starving, wants to rest. But Father kept on pushing him. Then I could understand why Father didn't let us stay at the first house. If Father had explained why, I could have followed him easily, but he didn't say anything except that we should go forward, which made me perplexed. There is such an aspect of Father's words. Therefore, it will be difficult for you to follow Father if you follow him according to your own standard and your own opinion. Father didn't say anything, he just kept on pushing him. In my life in the church, I always wanted Father to tell me what to do, but he never really said, you must do this, you must do that. He left it up to me to figure it out. In other words, I had to obey him. I had to obey Father's words not based on what I wanted, but on what he was telling me. So in Father's book, on page 107, it says, Wonpil Kim says, Father, how did you know the river crossing was about to be closed? Somehow I just knew. This kind of thing happens often to anyone who takes the path of heaven. People often don't know the salvation is just beyond the next obstacle. And if we didn't have a single moment to waste, the necessary would have grabbed you by the neck and pulled you across. So Father was in the right time at the right place, and he made it across the river. So if you could put the first slide up here. Being at the right place at the right time, there's a word for that. It's called synchronicity. And there's a definition of synchronicity. It comes from the Greek word syn, which means together, and time. And that's what it means. When things happen as if they're perfectly timed. So Father crosses the river right on time. And Wonpil Kim says, how did you know? And this is what I'm going to talk to you about now. The word synchronicity was used by Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychologist, in 1950. And he says that coincidental occurrence of psychic events such as similar thoughts in widely separated persons or mental images of unexpected events before it happens. So that's what happened here at the river. So if you can, and this here is the expanded definition. So contained in the definition of synchronicity, being at the right place at the right time, is this. Be open to receive the wisdom of each moment as it unfolds. In other words, live in the moment, in the here and the now. Knowing your personal mission enhances synchronicity. In other words, be aware that you're on a path. You may not fully understand it, but you know you're headed in this direction. So synchronicity can hint at your life's path and remind you where you're headed. Synchronicity is energy. Changing your energetic frequency will change people that are attracted to you. In other words, by you going on your path, the right people, events, books will come across your path. You're communicating with this energy field around you. Who you are being and how you are being freely directed affects this field. So when we talk about God, the Creator, he has an energetic component to his being, in other words. This one, be in service of the people in your life and all humanity, uplift every person, and synchronicity will increase. In other words, this is living for the sake of others right here. In other words, Bible says don't judge, because the people that are coming across your path are sent there by God, so you may reject the ones that God sent. So the first part and the other part are the most important here. And let go of the magic, let it happen to you. Relax, expand your awareness with the infinity of unlimited living consciousness. Stress blocks communication with this field. I don't want to get too into this, but this is the basis. Have any of you heard of the New Thought movement, which began in the 19th century? Coming from Hawaii, there are a lot of new age people out there. They're rejected by the established churches, by the way, but there are millions and millions of new thought people across the country. And they have a lot in common with the unification movement. In other words, we have a lot of friends, but we just don't know it yet. So embrace synchronicity, let it flow like pure water at spring, and allow it to unfold. Can you pull up the next slide? This one is from Ernest Holmes, who wrote this book. This is a monumental book. And on page 87, he talks about mind. So he says, there's only one mind. There's no such thing as your mind, my mind, and God's mind. There is only mind, which we all live and move and have our being. Things are ideas and form. So unification talks about thought forms. So Ernest Holmes and Divine Principle are saying the same thing. Things are ideas. Things are ideas. What else could they be? There is nothing from which to make things except ideas. In the beginning, we behold nothing invisible. There is only an infinite possibility, a limitless imagination, a consciousness, the only action of this consciousness being idea. That's what we call subjective mind. Divine Principle called this your original mind. That which we call our original mind, in reality, our identity and infinite mind. In other words, if you're a true man or a true woman, God's mind, your mind is God's mind in you, basically. So when Father knows, this is how Father, when he says, I just knew, God's telling him, you'll see that clearly as we go along. It is our mental atmosphere or center in universal subjective mind, God's mind, in which we are retained all of the images, impressions, inherited tendencies, and race suggestions. We see them that our mind, our subjective, our original mind, is the medium through which experiences come to us. How did Father know? This is explaining how Father knew. In other words, God's mind is in Reverend Moon's mind. You remember we showed the Al Cap interview, and Al Cap says, okay, you're going to speak. How do you know God's going to show up? Do you remember that? Yeah. So that was a good question. And what was Reverend Moon's answer? Reverend Moon's answer, I know he's going to show up because I have a mind-to-mind, heart-to-heart relationship with God. That's how. Because God's mind, there's only one mind in the universe. That means fallen nature doesn't exist anywhere. Fallen nature doesn't exist in God's mind and doesn't exist anywhere anything God created. Fallen nature only exists in the minds of people. Minds and hearts of people. Other than that, there is no fallen nature, just in the mind and hearts of people. So the question then is, how do we replace, remove, or get rid of this fallen nature, which blocks us from becoming one with God's mind? When I lived in Hawaii, I was a substitute teacher at the local high school, and often I would have a free period during the day. It was supposed to be a preparation period that the regular teachers had, So I didn't really have anything to do, so I would go to the teacher's lounge and I would write in my book. So I was writing in my journal, and inspiration was pouring right on my pen, right into the paper. I was really into it. I was focused. I was like really there, like really in the moment. And I'm writing and writing, and then my pen ran out of ink. I had a black pen. I'm writing, and nothing. The pen dried up. So just as I'm looking at my pen, I hear keys rattling outside front door of the teacher's lounge, and another teacher comes walking in to use the bathroom between classes. So he goes into the bathroom, comes back out, and on his way out, he drops his pen on the floor. And so he didn't know that he dropped his pen. He went right out the door. So I just got up and I picked up the pen and began writing again. That's synchronicity, right? That's what By then I began to understand what synchronicity was, but now I'm confirming it. So to me, when I saw that, I didn't say, "Oh, that's a miracle." No, that's kind of normal. That's what Father means when this kind of thing often happens when you're on heaven's path. One day, Ralph called me up and he said, "Do you want to go fishing with Father?" I said, "You mean now?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, let's go." So I was living in Staten Island, New York. Anybody know where that is? No, well, they call it the Forgotten Borough, but anyway. So Ralph and I go up the river, and we're going fishing. Wow, we're going to go fishing with Father. So we get to Tarrytown, the White House, which is not far from Belvedere, where True Father and his family lived. So we get to White House, we're going fishing. And the sister says, "Well, there's no more room, you can't go." So there are a couple other people there, and they're really bummed out because they wanted to go too. But I said, "Ralph, we've come this far, might as well go up the river." So we went up the river. And sure enough, there was Father at the dock, and from MFT I learned just to take on, just act like you belong there. So I acted like I was really meant to be there. And so Ralph and I grabbed some vests and some fishing poles and got on one of the boats. And now we're out in the Hudson River fishing. So I get seasick really easily, so it wasn't easy for me, So I was at the boat and, rocking like, it's the river, but I'm very sensitive. So I'm kind of like this, and I'm not thinking about yesterday, I'm not thinking about tomorrow. I'm right there in the moment. My line's in the water, and I can almost visualize it, the line at the bottom of the river. And I feel some very, very slight pulling on, and then whoosh, and I got a fish, and I reeled it up. The line was heavy, so the fish is about this big, this big. So at that time, really felt great. Father was catching a lot of fish, and so there's a catch limit on the river, because each boat can only catch so much fish. So he caught a lot of fish, and he brought it out to our boat, because we didn't really have that many fish, but I caught one. And so he added to our fish. So that was another example of synchronicity. In other words, we felt like we belonged there, and that's what we're supposed to go fishing, and we did. So I like to pull up the next slide, which is page 276 and 278 of Bob's book. I have a confession to make that I wasn't really into this book. I thought it was just more church literature and stuff. More church literature and stuff. But then I saw this book right out there, and I grabbed it. I knew I was meant to have it. So this is Won Pyo Kim's book. Often a little small book has a lot to say, and he did. So I go, wow, that's really good. And so because I was able to, being aware of synchronicity, I grabbed the book because it was in my path. I was meant to read it. So I grabbed it. It was right out there. Anybody leave this book there? Because I'm not giving it back. So anyway, I read that, and then I began to read Father's book, and now that's where this comes from, which is Peace-Loving Global Citizen, which is really, really good. If you're going to go walk the life of faith, you must read this book because it has a lot of inner truth, not just the outer, external to the inner truth, which is what we're talking about now. So, once you read along, I'll read from here. This is from page 276, 278. We are not aware of the exact time when morning becomes noon. Neither are we aware of the exact time that evening becomes night. That's true, right? In the same way, human beings have no way of knowing the moment when heaven does its work. That is how it is with our lives as well. Our moments of success and failure all pass us by without our being fully aware of exactly when they began to unfold. The same is true with nations. We cannot know the moment when good or ill fortune comes to a nation. Heavenly fortune is a force that moves the world. So another name for synchronicity is heavenly fortune, right? Heavenly fortune is like manna. You know the story, the Israelites in the wilderness? The manna. They had to be at the right place at the right time to get the manna, right? That's what heavenly fortune is. It is a principle that makes the universe go round. Though we may not know it, there is clearly something called heavenly fortune, which the one who created this world uses to conduct his providence. The universe moves in perfect accordance with its own order. All beings in the world bear with them a certain principle that is put there even before they exist. When a baby is born, no one has to teach it how to breathe or opens its eyes. The baby does these things without being compelled. Things that happen on their own hold within them important keys to the secrets of the universe. Many natural phenomena seems to just happen on their own. In reality, though, they don't happen that way. Hidden within natural phenomena in the universe is a directional force. Another name for this directional force is called the law of love. This directional force we are not aware of and do not understand. This is the same with the forces of fortune in the universe, or heavenly fortune. As the universe turns, it is certain there will be a period of powerful fortune. If we understand the principle of the universe whereby spring follows winter and is then followed by summer, then we can foresee a bright future for Korea after a long winter of misfortune. So the misfortune he's talking about is Korea was devastated during the Korean War. And now Korea will receive heavenly fortune. Those who are wise, will align themselves with the laws and rhythms of the universe. When I was in America, I would often fish on the Hudson River near my home. I may have been a skilled fisherman since I was a young boy, but there were days on the river when I could not catch so much as a minnow and had to return home disheartened. Fish have paths that they travel at certain times. If we don't know where these paths are and what times they are on these paths, we won't catch any fish. A person who doesn't understand this could keep his line in the water all day and all night, and it won't do him any good. The same is true with heavenly fortune, even if it's staring us in the face. That is why it is important to have a keen understanding of heavenly fortune and the ability to sense its movements. So heavenly fortune and synchronicity are the same thing. The Bible says that God created the heaven and earth. That's the first line of the Bible. God created heaven and earth. But before God created heaven and earth, he created the idea of heaven and earth in his own mind. These principles of the universe are called what? Divine principle is the principles how God created the heaven and the earth. And this same principle is already in you. But this principle in you is blocked. It's blocked by our fallen nature, and this fallen nature comes from self-centered individualism. And the self-centered individualism is reinforced by conditional love that we practice every day. So this is why Won Pyo Kim says in his book that if you see Jesus and Father Moon from your standard and opinion, you won't be able to follow. You won't be able to go the way of heaven. That's why Jesus said, if you love me, you will do what I say. Why did Jesus say that? Because it's the only way to awaken the principle within you. The principle is already there, but it's blocked because the fallen nature, which is a habit. So to unblock the principle that's already in you, you must be obedient and figure it out yourself. You have to have give and take with the principle daily, else you'll be overwhelmed by the cares of this world. So when Jesus said, you love me, if you love me, you obey me. That's what Jesus said in John. So I'd like to show one more slide. So on page 136 of the same book. A year after my release from prison, Reverend Moon was in prison several times, in a concentration camp, prison in Korea, North Korea, South Korea, America. Our church had 400 members. This is the very beginning of the unification movement that would become a worldwide movement. As I prayed, I would call out their names one by one. Their faces would pass through my mind even before I called their names. Did you get that? In other words, he has a mind-to-mind, heart-to-heart relationship with God. And God is putting the image of that member in his mind even before he says the member's name. Some would be crying, some laughing. In my prayers, I could tell how each person was doing, including whether they were suffering from illness. Sometimes, as I called names in prayer, I get an inspiration that a particular person would come to the church that day. Any of you have an inspiration like that? Yeah? Wow. That's called what? Right. Synchronicity, exactly. Right place, right time. The person would come without fail. When I would go to someone who appeared sick to me in my prayer and ask, "Are you sick?" the person would confirm it. Members were amazed that I would know without being told that they were sick. Each time they asked, "How did you do that?" I would answer with a smile, Father said. In other words, you have to figure it out yourself. You have your own responsibility. So synchronicity confirms that you're on the right path of heaven. That's what synchronicity is. When I was just 4 years in the movement, I was a seminary student at UTS, and I was really grateful to be there. I knew what a gift it was. So one day I decided to go down to the boathouse. So I went down to the boathouse is right on the Hudson River. And when I got there, there's my friend Willis. He was by himself and he's cleaning the fish nets. Any of you cleaned a fish net before? It's a really stinky job. The fish heads and dirt and mud and, I don't really, fishing is not my thing. So anyway, there was Willis, so I were helping him, and so we were stretching out the net on the lawn and picking up all the dirt from the neshkas. After they dried out, we hang them up in the boathouse. So we're working, and all of a sudden, I hear this car pull up, and this door slammed. And I knew it was Reverend Moon. Something told me, it's Reverend Moon. But I couldn't see because I was kind of over here, and the house was blocking the view of the car that pulled up. Sure enough, so I started walking there, and Reverend Moon's walking towards me, and he says, "Key." I said, "What? Key?" And as I'm saying key, I had the keys to the boathouse in my pocket. I don't know how he knew that, but anyway. So I'm fumbling with the back door of the house because I'd never been in there. And he's looking at me, hurry up, hurry up. He had to go to the bathroom. He was getting, he wanted to go to the bathroom before he went fishing. See, you can't do that on the river. So I let him in, and I figured, well, he's probably going fishing. So I got his fishing pole and his bait box of bait. And he came out of the house, and I gave him his fishing pole, and we walked towards the boat. There's a rubber boat already in the water. And by then, the seminary president, and the other people that were invited to go fishing came down. Apparently, they were waiting up in the main building, but your father came down to the boathouse directly. He didn't go to the main building. So they got out there, "You, brother, get father's pole. Get his bait." And I'm looking. It was chaotic because, they were trying to be leaders, I guess. But I didn't say anything. I just was looking at Father, what is he going to do? And so he was in the moment too, so he started humming. So we go over to the boat, and he gives me the pole back that I had given him. But I'll always remember, he gives it to me with the same way that I gave it to him. So he gives me his pole back because he needed both hands to get in the boat. So he gets in the boat, and he sits down, and he's just patiently waiting for the leaders to come. So they're all, where should we sit? Should I sit? They're all jockeying in position there. I was just a young student. I didn't know anything. So, but what I remember is Father said, key. And what I'd like to leave you with is you yourself have the keys within you. So all you have to do is be obedient to God's word. And as you do, the fallen nature that you were born with goes away and your original nature increases. A person whose original nature is 100% is in oneness with God. He's already in one with God. So when I left, there's a picture of me by the boat. I'm kind of thin, brown hair, young guy. But I always remember that you have the key. You have the key to your own salvation. So I'd like to end here and say thank you for letting me come up here and talk. So I'll end with a small prayer, short prayer. Heavenly Parents, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you for being with each and every one of us as we walk the path of heaven back to you. Thank you for all the sacrifice and suffering you went through to bring us to this point in history. I pray that we become aware of this point in history and figure out, without being told, figure out on our own what we should do at this point in our lives. Heavenly Parents, thank you for all your love, all your guidance, and all your patience. I pray this prayer in the name of Donald B. and of God, your blessed family. Adieu.